Ever wonder where Hollywood's real blockbusters played out? On screen or at 3 a.m. behind locked soundstage doors? Imagine Claudette Colbert ringing a locomotive bell while champagne sloshes down a fake Pullman aisle. Or Charlton Heston goading Stephen Boyd into a torch-lit chariot drag race that splintered a $1 million set. Gene Kelly once flooded an entire stage to reprise his Rain number, frying 3 mic booms, and David O. Selznick's Mint Julep binge drained half of MGM's ice supply in a single night. These weren't scenes. They were rap parties the studios prayed you'd never hear about. Ready to break in after Cut? She Married Her Boss, Columbia, 1935. When the cameras finished rolling on She Married Her Boss in the summer of 1935, director Gregory LaCava, notorious for his twin obsessions with railroads and fine French champagne, decided that Columbia Pictures' bottom line could withstand one extraordinary night of celebration. LaCava had this mad vision, recalls film historian Margaret Booth in her 1985 memoir. He wanted everyone to experience what he called the romance of rail travel without actually leaving Hollywood. Studio records show that LaCava somehow convinced executives to winch an entire Pullman sleeper car, all 80 tons of gleaming mahogany and brass, directly onto Columbia's Stage 8. The massive undertaking required removing part of the soundstage roof and employing a specialized crane typically reserved for constructing skyscrapers. They dressed that train car like it was ready for a cross-country journey, says film preservation expert Martin Scorsese. Uniformed porters, turned-down service, proper dining settings. LaCava even hired actual Southern Pacific Railway staff to serve the guests. Claudette Colbert, still wearing her character's City Hall wedding dress, appointed herself conductor for the evening. Between sips of Ruinart champagne, she would ring the authentic locomotive bell installed at one end of the stage whenever someone emptied their glass, a signal for immediate refills. The electrical department rigged special lighting that simulated a full night's journey, notes film archivist Robert Osborne, starting with sunset hues, transitioning to midnight blue with stars projected on the soundstage walls, and finally ending with dawn breaking as the last guest stumbled home. Production secretary Mary McLean's diary, now preserved in the Academy's collection, describes how props foreman Benny Russell had secretly arranged with LaCava to use the celebration for his own romantic milestone. Just before the simulated dawn, Russell led assistant film cutter Jane Hoffman to the smoking compartment where he'd hidden an engagement ring inside the train's emergency brake housing. Their engagement announcement, punctuated by Colbert's enthusiastic bell ringing, provided the perfect finale to what the diary calls a night where Hollywood magic seemed entirely real. Gone with the Wind, Selznick International, 1939. David O. Selznick wasn't just producing the most ambitious film of his career, he was determined to throw the most memorable rap party in Hollywood history. After nearly 2 years of production turmoil, multiple directors and budget overruns that made MGM executives reach for their smelling salts, Gone with the Wind finally wrapped principal photography in July 1939. Selznick sent out these spectacular invitations, recalls costume designer Walter Plunkett in a 1972 interview. Heavy cream cardstock with gilt edges and red wax seals. They promised cotton-field cocktails at 8, barbecue at 9, dancing till dawn. Nobody in town dared miss it. The producer commandeered MGM's New Orleans street backlot set, transforming it into an antebellum fantasy with 1,500 imported Chinese lanterns, creating a magical canopy of light. Studio electricians worked overtime rigging special effects like simulated fireflies in the artificial magnolia trees. Clark Gable arrived in denim overalls, with Carol Lombard barefoot beside him, notes film chronicler Hedda Parsons in her unpublished diaries. They were making a statement, Hollywood royalty playing at being regular folks. Meanwhile, Vivien Leigh stayed completely in character, practically floating through the party in a green velvet dress, plucking magnolia blossoms off the prop trees to crown passing heads. The musical accompaniment wasn't left to chance either. Max Steiner, who was still completing the film's iconic score, brought his full 50-piece orchestra. They performed jazz-influenced arrangements of his themes, giving guests a swinging preview of music that wouldn't be heard publicly for months. Selznick's brother Myron, one of Hollywood's most powerful agents, managed the bar service, records MGM's internal memo. He stood on a flat car dressed as 12 Oaks Plantation, personally overseeing a team mixing mint juleps in silver cups. When they ran out, They switched to Dixie paper cups, sacrilege for such expensive bourbon, but nobody complained after their third drink. The final studio requisition forms, preserved in the MGM archives, list staggering quantities: 912 pounds of crushed ice, 480 Cuban cigars, 114 bottles of Kentucky bourbon, and enough barbecue to feed a small Georgia town. The next day's Variety column dryly noted that Selznick's farewell orgy likely cost more than MGM's entire 1938 Christmas bonus pool, a fact that didn't bother Selznick one bit as his film marched toward box office immortality. The Wizard of Oz, MGM, 1939. As the final shot of the yellow brick road was safely printed in the summer of 1939, MGM's Culver City lot transformed into a celebration almost as technicolored as the film itself. The Munchkin actors, all 124 of them, had endured months of uncomfortable costumes, intense lighting, and the challenges of being far from home. They were ready to celebrate in spectacular fashion. The Munchkins pooled their per diems to commission a sheet cake that boggled the mind, remembers Assistant Director Wallace Worsley, Jr. It stood nearly 10 feet long, with ruby red frosting spelling out, "There's no place like home." The bakery had to deliver it in sections on 3 separate trucks and assemble it on site. Judy Garland, though only 16 and usually sheltered by studio handlers, was given the honor of cutting the first slice. Ray Bolger, still wearing remnants of his scarecrow makeup, entertained the crowd by tap dancing on a riser, positioned directly beside the towering matte painting of the Emerald City. Someone from the special effects department had the brilliant idea to dust the entire cake with powdered dry ice, notes Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch in her unpublished memoirs. It created this magical smoking effect, like the cake was emerging from the poppy field. Of course, nobody could eat those slices, but it made for unforgettable photographs. The celebration took a momentary turn toward panic when Terry, the Cairn Terrier who played Toto, disappeared during the height of festivities. A frantic search ensued until an anxious animal wrangler, who had been responsible for the film's flying monkeys, finally discovered the dog curled up asleep inside a prop basket filled with fake apples. The electrical shop apprentices had somehow gotten their hands on one of the spare cowardly lion tails, recalls set decorator Edwin Willis. After the third round of drinks and a particularly enthusiastic chorus of "If I Only Had a Brain," they were using it as an impromptu tug-of-war rope. Bert Lahr just laughed and judged the contest. Perhaps the most important preservation moment came when MGM librarian Margaret Booth noticed the original script draft, complete with handwritten notes from multiple directors and writers, being used as an impromptu plate for cake slices. She quietly rescued the frosting-smeared document, now one of the treasures of the Academy's Margaret Herrick Library collection, complete with what curator Ron Haver later described as authentic yellow brick road-colored frosting, still visible on pages 43 through 61. Casablanca, Warner Brothers, 1942. When Michael Curtis called the final wrap on Casablanca in August 1942, Warner Brothers was already buzzing about the film's potential. With America fully engaged in World War II and studio resources increasingly limited by wartime restrictions, the conventional wrap party with catered food and imported champagne seemed impossible. Curtis, however, had a more creative solution. Curtis dismissed the crew at 6 p.m. as usual, recalls script supervisor Meta Rebner. But he quietly passed word to everyone, "Come back at 8 and bring your ration cards." When we returned, the Rick's Café Americain set had been transformed from a filming location into an actual functioning nightclub. Studio electricians had reconfigured the lighting to create the smoky, intimate atmosphere of a real North African nightclub rather than the harsh illumination needed for filming. Property masters stocked the bar with genuine liquor. Much of it contributed from the personal collections of executives who understood this film might be special. Dooley Wilson wasn't just acting when he played Sam, notes cinematographer Arthur Edison in his memoir. The man was a legitimate musical talent. He played stride piano standards for nearly 6 hours straight that night. When someone finally convinced him to take a break, his fingertips were actually bleeding from the piano wires. He just wrapped them in handkerchiefs and kept playing. Humphrey Bogart, typically reserved at studio functions, appointed himself honorary bartender. He specialized in mixing French 75 cocktails, a potent combination of gin, champagne, lemon juice, and sugar, serving them exclusively to guests who presented a prop Vichy water bottle as their passport. Ingrid Bergman lost a friendly accent contest to Peter Lorre. Warner publicist Alex Evolov wrote in an internal memo, Lorre had everyone in stitches when he demonstrated he could recite La Marseillaise backward after just 2 glasses of Pernod. Bergman laughed so hard, she knocked over a prop palm tree. As dawn approached, Curtis surveyed the damage. 3 broken Moroccan sconces, 1 missing fez hat, later discovered adorning the studio water tower, and countless cigarette burns on the tablecloths. Producer Hal Wallace arrived as the party was winding down, taking in the scene of happy exhaustion. His note to Curtis the next day became legend at Warner Brothers. Love the party, let's steal half of it for the Paris flashback. True to his word, several unscripted moments from that night, including a spontaneous singing of La Marseillaise, influenced reshoots that created one of cinema's most memorable sequences. It's a Wonderful Life, Liberty Films, 1946. Frank Capra, fresh from his service documenting World War II for the U.S. Army, approached his first post-war feature with a renewed appreciation for simple American pleasures. When It's a Wonderful Life wrapped in July 1946, he was determined to celebrate with a party that reflected the film's heartfelt values rather than Hollywood excess. Capra couldn't match Selznick's lavish budgets, remembers assistant director Arthur S. Black Jr. Instead, he embraced the film's small-town spirit. They rolled picnic tables onto stage 14, which was still dressed with the Bedford Falls snow scenes. With all that fake snow piled around, it felt like a winter carnival in July. James Stewart, embodying the same unpretentious charm as his character George Bailey, manned a makeshift grill. Jimmy insisted on cooking for everyone, recalls Donna Reed. He figured out how to position a standard studio wind machine so its intake vent generated enough heat to grill hot dogs. The technical crew was horrified at this misuse of expensive equipment, but Capra just laughed and asked for his extra mustard. Reed herself participated in traditional party games, bobbing for apples in a galvanized metal tub borrowed from the Potter's Bank set. Production records note that the tub was subsequently returned to the properties department with significant lipstick damage. Capra circulated throughout the evening with an 8mm camera, instructing each guest to film 3 seconds of what makes life wonderful. This footage, capturing candid moments of the cast and crew celebrating, was spliced together but forgotten in Liberty Films' assets when the company was absorbed by Paramount. The film was rediscovered during archival work in 1986 and now appears as a special feature titled It's a Wonderful Rap Party on the film's Blu-ray release. The most touching moment came at midnight, remembers set decorator Emile Curie. Capra gathered everyone around and announced that the studio was providing taxi fare home for safety. What he didn't mention was that the envelopes each contained a $50 Guardian Angel bonus, a substantial sum in 1946. The studio accountants later found these payments disguised in the books as atmospheric consultant fees. The evening's only casualty was Sam Wainwright's prop cash register from the Bailey Building and Lone Set. A slightly intoxicated grip attempted to lean on it during an energetic jitterbug demonstration, sending it crashing to the floor. Capra reportedly picked up the pieces himself, saying, "Every time a cash register breaks, an accountant gets his wings." The 7-year itch, 20th Century Fox, 1954. Billy Wilder approached rap parties with the same sardonic wit he brought to his filmmaking. When The 7-Year Itch completed shooting in September 1954, he bypassed the usual studio soundstage celebration in favor of commandeering Romanoff's, the Beverly Hills restaurant where Hollywood royalty dined nightly. Wilder didn't just book Romanoff's regular dining room, recalls makeup artist Whitey Snyder. He took over the entire rooftop terrace, which normally wasn't even used for events. Prince Mike Romanoff himself, who wasn't actually Russian royalty despite his claims, was so impressed by the guest list that he opened his private wine cellar. The centerpiece of the evening was Wilder's mischievous screening of a specially assembled gag reel. Billy compiled every blown take from Marilyn's famous subway grate scene, remembers cinematographer Charles Lang Jr. 22 different attempts at increasing wind power and Marilyn's increasingly genuine surprise. The crew was howling with laughter. It was like watching the most exclusive blooper reel in history. The party took an unexpected turn when Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall arrived, despite having nothing to do with the film. Bogart made a beeline for the punch bowl, emptying an entire bottle of Patron tequila into it. Bogey called it Bronx bathwater. Bacall later told Vanity Fair, "I warned everyone within earshot, but by then people were too amused to care about the consequences." Studio head Daryl Zanuck made a grand entrance around midnight, unveiling a spectacular cake shaped like the Lexington Avenue subway grate from the film's most iconic scene. The pastry chef had rigged it with dry ice chambers, notes production assistant Walter Bernstein. When they cut into it, vapor hissed upward through the frosting grate, just like in the movie. Marilyn was supposed to cut the first slice, but she'd wisely skipped her own wrap party, probably sensing the circus atmosphere. The celebration grew so crowded that at 3 a.m., Los Angeles fire marshals threatened to issue citations. Wilder, never one to let authorities dampen his spirits, announced to the assembly, "The party continues at Hollywood Star Lanes." He led a procession of 200 increasingly wobbly celebrants to the nearby bowling alley. Monroe showed up at the bowling alley surprisingly, recalls costume designer Ori Kelly. She bowled a perfect spare in 3-inch stiletto heels, then disappeared before the press could be alerted. Wilder's telegram to Fox executives the next morning became legendary in studio corridors. Wrapped picture and pins, pay the shoe rental bill. Singin' in the Rain, MGM, 1952. When MGM's landmark musical Singin' in the Rain completed filming in November 1951, Gene Kelly, notorious perfectionist and co-director, had a vision for the rap party that matched the film's joyful exuberance. His concept, recreate the movie's iconic rain sequence indoors, but with the entire cast and crew participating. Gene insisted there was only one appropriate way to celebrate this picture, remembers assistant choreographer Gene Coyne. Everyone should experience the pure joy of dancing in artificial precipitation. The studio executives thought he was joking until they saw the requisition forms for additional water tanks. The studio's grip department worked overnight to rig garden hoses to the lighting grid above an empty soundstage. Special rain bars, the same equipment used for Kelly's famous dance number, were installed at strategic intervals to ensure proper rainfall distribution. The studio's water pressure, however, proved more robust than anticipated. When they turned on the system, the pressure blew out a boom microphone transformer, recalls sound engineer Douglas Shearer. The entire stage plunged into darkness just as the water started coming down. But here's the remarkable thing. Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, and Donald O'Connor immediately launched into an a cappella version of the title song and kept dancing in pitch-black darkness while electricians scrambled to restore power. For nearly 20 minutes, the only illumination came from emergency exit signs and the occasional camera flash as the party continued in the dark. When lights finally returned, guests discovered they were wading in ankle-deep water, the drainage system having been overwhelmed by the indoor downpour. Everyone kicked off their shoes and went barefoot, remembers costume designer Walter Plunkett. Expensive evening gowns were hiked up to the knees. The orchestra's sheet music dissolved into pulp, so they switched to playing by ear while people tossed the soaked pages around like ticker tape. Reynolds, just 19 during filming, fully embraced the aquatic chaos. "My satin tap shoes never dried out properly," she later told Merv Griffin on his television show. "They developed this unique moldy patina that seemed appropriate for the film that nearly drowned us all, so I bronzed them exactly as they were, water damage and all, and kept them on my mantle right next to my divorce papers," from Eddie Fisher. MGM's insurance department later filed claims for 9 water-damaged camera magazines, 16 ruined microphones, and 1 documented case of trench foot among the orchestra members. Studio head Louis B. Mayer reportedly remarked upon seeing the bill, "Next time, tell Kelly to celebrate with cake like a normal person." Giant. Warner Brothers, 1956. When George Stevens called the final wrap on the Texas location shooting of Giant in August 1955, the cast and crew had endured months of scorching days on the unforgiving gypsum flats outside Marfa, Texas. The director, known for his meticulous approach, decided to reward everyone with a celebration that embraced the authentic Western surroundings, rather than rushing back to Hollywood. Stevens declared dusk to dawn liberty for everyone, recalls production manager Charles C. Coleman. The entire company had been living like nomads for months, so there was this collective agreement to make our last night in Texas unforgettable. Local ranchers, who had been providing livestock and serving as extras, volunteered to help transform the filmed landscape into a proper Texas celebration. They strung catholites between actual windmills surrounding the plywood facade of Riata, the film's fictional ranch house. A local conjunto band set up beside Benedict's porch, playing traditional corridos that echoed across the flats. Elizabeth Taylor was completely transformed by her time in Texas, remembers wardrobe supervisor Marjorie Corso. She'd arrived as this delicate Hollywood princess, but by wrap night, she was borrowing an actual branding iron from one of the Wranglers. She burned her initials, E.T., into a spare prop steer hide while everyone cheered. Rock Hudson then tried to do the same but missed completely and branded his own boot instead. James Dean, already showing the introspective reserve that would become part of his legend, spent most of the evening quietly tending to a pit where Cabrito, young goat, had been slow cooking since dawn. Dean hardly spoke all night, recalls catering coordinator Miguel Sanchez, but he personally carved meat for every crew member, making sure each plate had the perfect portion. The most dramatic moment came near midnight, when Dean, perhaps emboldened by the celebration, approached the corral holding the last remaining longhorn from filming. Nobody quite knows what possessed him, remembers animal wrangler Casey Tibbs, but Dean insisted on branding that final longhorn with his own initials before releasing it back to its owner. He actually mounted it bareback and rode it, very slowly, through the buffet line while balancing a plate of brisket. This surreal image was captured by Life magazine photographer Phil Stern, creating what would become, after Dean's tragic death just weeks later, one of the publication's most haunting Hollywood images. Elizabeth Taylor kept the scorched steak plate from which she had eaten that night, later donating it to the Marfa Historical Society, where it remains on display alongside other giant memorabilia. The local museum's plaque quotes Taylor, "Texas taught me there's nothing more beautiful than making memories under stars that actually outshine the ones in Hollywood." Some Like It Hot. United Artists, 1959. When Billy Wilder completed Some Like It Hot in November 1958, his patience with star Marilyn Monroe had been stretched beyond professional limits. After enduring countless delayed call times, forgotten lines, and 47 takes for a simple scene of Monroe saying, "Where's the bourbon?" Swing Wilder made an unprecedented decision regarding the wrap party. Wilder sent out invitations with a handwritten postscript, recalls script supervisor Lenore Coffey. "If Marilyn shows up, I'm pulling the plug on the orchestra and going home." Everyone thought he was joking until his assistant director posted security guards at the Hotel del Coronado entrance with explicit instructions to politely turn away Miss Monroe. Monroe, perhaps sensing the atmosphere, stayed away from the celebration at the iconic San Diego Hotel where much of the film had been shot. The party proceeded with a decidedly irreverent tone that reflected the film's gender-bending comedy. Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon arrived in full drag, remembers makeup artist Whitey Snyder. They'd stolen their costumes from the wardrobe department and had the makeup team recreate their female looks one last time. They performed a surprisingly good lip-sync version of I Want to Be Loved by You while the orchestra played. Curtis kept using his perfect Cary Grant impression while dressed as Josephine, which had everyone in stitches. The Hotel del Coronado management seemed less amused by the increasingly raucous celebration. Night manager Edgar Wellman's log for the evening notes, 47 noise complaints from guests between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. Mr. Wilder's party has taken over the entire beachfront, band still playing at sunrise, sand in all carpets. As the evening wore on, script supervisor Marshall Gertz conducted an impromptu auction, offering Monroe's abandoned daily call sheet, complete with her dressing room requirements and specific lighting requests, to the highest bidder. It went for $200, recalls property master Gordon Cole. They used the money to pay the hotel's sand damage fees after Jack Lemmon convinced 20 crew members to go swimming in full costume around 3 a.m. Wilder, never one to miss an opportunity for a perfect closing line, sent a telegram to United Artists executives the following day that became almost as famous as the film's own final line. Picture finished. Guests still in wigs estimate dissipation by Monday. The studio framed the telegram, which still hangs in UA's executive offices, as a reminder of Hollywood's golden age of comedy, both on screen and off. Ben-Hur, MGM Cinecittà, 1959. William Wyler's Ben-Hur represented one of the most massive undertakings in cinematic history, filming at Rome's Cinecittà studios with thousands of extras, enormous sets, and a budget that made MGM executives break out in cold sweats. When Wyler finally captured the last shot in January 1959, he was determined to conclude with Roman-scale magnificence. Wyler had this extraordinary vision for the rap celebration, recalls second unit director Andrew Martin. He wanted to transform the replica Roman Forum into a torchlit banquet space that would have made Caesar himself envious. The Italian crew members thought he was crazy until MGM started flying an actual European aristocracy for the guest list. Studio records confirm that MGM's publicity department arranged for 3 princes, 2 princesses, a duchess, and a marquise to attend, lending authentic blue-blooded prestige to what was already the most expensive film production of its era. Italian paparazzi lined the studio gates, capturing arrivals of Rome's most elite families, mingling with Hollywood's brightest stars. The set decorating department worked through the night, remembers art director Edward Carfagno. They flooded the lowered sections of the Forum set with 6 inches of water, then floated hundreds of oil lamps on the surface. With torches burning along every column, it created this otherworldly golden light reflecting everywhere. Felt like you'd stepped back 2,000 years. The evening's most legendary moment came shortly after midnight, when Charlton Heston, perhaps channeling his character's competitive spirit, challenged Stephen Boyd to an impromptu chariot race. Not with the actual horses, thank God, notes animal wrangler Rudd Weatherwax. They rigged 2 of the prop chariots to Fiat tractor engines that had been used for pulling camera dollies. These motorized chariots, with Heston and Boyd still dressed in evening attire, thundered around the remnants of the circus set, while hundreds of guests cheered from the sidelines. Wardrobe mistress Elizabeth Haffenden's logbook meticulously records the damage. 2 ruined tuxedo jackets, 1 splintered chariot wheel, and Mr. Heston's broken wristwatch, which he insists should be charged to Mr. Boyd's account. The celebration continued until dawn, fueled by what production records identify as the studio's entire Roman wine allocation. 400 bottles of Chianti Classico consumed over 7 hours. When the sun finally rose over Cinecittà, Heston reportedly strode into the early morning dailies, screening still wearing his laurel victory crown, albeit backward on his head, proudly proclaiming to Wyler, "I have drunk the Tiber dry, but I'm ready to work." Wyler's alleged response, "We wrapped yesterday, Chuck. Go sleep it off before your flight." But not for me. Paramount, 1959. As Clark Gable completed his final Paramount picture, But Not For Me, in April 1959, Hollywood's king was feeling reflective about his long career. At 58, with his MGM contract long expired and working as an independent star, Gable approached the traditional rap party with characteristic unpretentiousness that surprised and delighted his younger co-stars. Gable hated what he called Hollywood fruit basket nonsense, recalls director Walter Lang. Most stars gave out pretentious thank you gifts, silver picture frames or monogrammed handkerchiefs. Clark announced he was doing something different. When the final scene wrapped, Gable's wife Kay arrived with her station wagon packed with handmade wicker hampers. Inside each was something unexpected: homemade potato chips, fried by Kay herself at their Encino ranch house. Every basket carried a ribbon-tied tag with a playful message. Frankly, they're delicious. The joke, of course, was riffing on his famous "Gone with the Wind" line, explains co-star Carol Baker. But what made it special was that these weren't store-bought chips. Kay had been up for 2 days straight, hand-slicing potatoes and frying batch after batch. They were absolutely the best chips any of us had ever tasted. Paper-thin, perfectly salted, and still warm when we opened the baskets. The rap party, held on Paramount's Stage 14, took an unexpected turn when Debbie Reynolds, who had a small role in the film, convinced Gable to demonstrate his dancing skills. Debbie somehow talked the king into attempting a jitterbug, remembers grip technician Thomas Shepard. Gable protested that he was too old, but once the rented Wurlitzer started playing In the Mood, he showed everybody he still had plenty of spring in his step. They nearly toppled the thing when he tried to twirl Debbie under his arm. Director Walter Lang later wrote in his memoir, The Paramount Years, about discovering an unexpected consequence of Gable's unorthodox gift. The next morning, my camera operator found potato chip crumbs inside the Mitchell BNC's film gate. Somehow they'd migrated from everyone's fingers. This was particularly alarming since the studio's weekly camera hygiene inspection was scheduled for that afternoon. We had the equipment room smelling like vinegar and salt by the time we finished cleaning. The Misfits, United Artists, 1961. When John Huston called the final wrap on The Misfits in November 1960, few on set could have predicted the film's tragic place in Hollywood history. The production, filmed in the punishing Nevada desert heat, had pushed its stars to their limits, with Marilyn Monroe's marriage to writer Arthur Miller crumbling during shooting, and Clark Gable exhausted by performing his own stunts at 59. Huston finished the last shot at noon, recalls script supervisor Meta Carson. There was this strange, solemn mood, like everyone sensed this wasn't just the end of a difficult shoot, but something more profound. The director arranged for the entire company to be bused to a weathered Reno roadhouse that epitomized the film's exploration of the fading American West. The establishment, never identified in production memos but described as 20 miles past nowhere, featured horseshoes, holding open screen doors, and a jukebox filled with Hank Williams records. Monroe arrived late, which wasn't unusual, remembers makeup artist Whitey Snyder. She'd been battling terrible insomnia throughout filming. When she finally appeared around sunset, Gable, who everyone could see was just absolutely spent, met her on the porch. They didn't speak, just hugged for what seemed like minutes, while Magnum photographer Inga Morath captured what would become one of Hollywood's most poignant images. Inside the roadhouse, the celebration maintained a bittersweet quality that mirrored the film's elegiac tone. Montgomery Clift, whose career had been derailed by a near-fatal car accident years earlier, surprised everyone by producing a battered guitar and playing raw, haunting cowboy songs that several crew members later described as more authentic than anything we'd heard on Nevada radio stations. Eli Wallach appointed himself Monroe's personal dance instructor, recalls prop master Frank McKelvey. He spent an hour teaching her a proper two-step, moving slowly and patiently, like they had all the time in the world. Watching her concentrate so completely on something simple like dance steps, you'd never know she was Hollywood's biggest star. The evening took an unexpected turn when Huston, notorious gambler and risk-taker, discovered he'd left his wallet in Reno. Rather than borrowing money, he placed $3 silver in the Roadhouse's ancient slot machine. He hit a modest jackpot on his second pull, remembers production accountant William Spencer. Just enough to cover the entire bar tab. Huston declared it the only honest money I've made all year. The Sound of Music, 20th Century Fox, 1965. When Robert Wise captured the final helicopter shot of Julie Andrews spinning on that alpine ridge on June 4, 1964, The Sound of Music wrapped principal photography in a mood of cautious optimism. No one yet knew the film would become a global phenomenon, and for decades, the highest-grossing musical ever made. The Austrian location shooting had endured rain delays, difficult mountain terrain, and the challenges of working with 7 young actors playing the Von Trapp children. After that last shot, Wise announced that everyone, absolutely everyone from Grips to Stars, was invited to Salzburg's historic Brostubel beer hall, recalls assistant director David Tomblin. The whole company piled into buses still wearing their costumes from the mountain sequence. I remember Julie Andrews still had grass stains on her skirt from shooting the opening number. The Brostubel, Austria's largest beer hall with a history dating back to 1621, had never hosted a Hollywood film crew before. Management initially seemed overwhelmed by the sudden arrival of nearly 200 boisterous Americans and Britons, but quickly embraced the spirit of celebration. Director Robert Wise revealed a hidden talent, remembers Nicholas Hammond, who played Friedrich von Trapp. He brought out a guitar and started strumming while the 7 of us kids gathered around him like it was story time. Before long, the entire beer hall was singing along to Do Re Mi and Edelweiss. The locals probably thought we were completely mad. The celebration took on a distinctly Austrian flavor when Salzburg's St. Peter's Abbey, which had allowed filming in their cemetery for the family's escape scene, sent over a delegation of actual monks. These wonderful men in their traditional robes had been so helpful during filming, recalls associate producer Saul Chaplin. They surprised everyone by unveiling a special beer they'd brewed just for the occasion, with bottles labeled Edelweiss, Auf Wiedersehen Brew, complete with Edelweiss flowers infused into the recipe. Christopher Plummer, who famously maintained a love-hate relationship with the film he nicknamed The Sound of Mucus for its sweetness, revealed a mischievous side that evening. Plummer kept spiking his beer stein with schnapps from a flask hidden in his jacket, remembers costume designer Dorothy Jeekins. After his third refill, he gathered the children actors and led them in what he called the realistic Von Trapp family version of My Favorite Things, a mock dirge with distinctly unfamily-friendly lyrics that had the crew crying with laughter. Fox studio publicists, always alert for promotional opportunities, kept meticulous records of the celebration. Their internal memo notes that 70 guests were still singing So Long Farewell in 6 different languages at 3 a.m. when the beer hall's exhausted accordionist finally collapsed over his instrument, ending the musical marathon. 13 rap nights, 13 vanishing act mornings. The props went back on racks, the accountants filed their memos, and the legends slipped into rumor, until tonight. If you've ever watched end credits scroll and guessed the crew was racing for cocktails, now you know. Sometimes the real movie magic happened after the cameras stopped. Like, share and subscribe for more untold Hollywood history. And remember, next time you strike a set, check the cupboard for missing sheet cake or a stray laurel crown. Somebody's rap party may still be echoing in the rafters.